Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into today's webinar, Know Your Worth and Accelerate Your Career, with career coach and author Octavia Goradima. My name is Joseph Blancas, and I serve as an assistant director for the Alumni Career Engagement Team at UCLA Alumni Affairs. In today's program, you will receive advice on how to cement your career values and set new goals, research and negotiate your salary, as well as how to overcome setbacks and build your career with confidence. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank our Alumni Association sustaining donors. It's with your help that we are able to strengthen the Bruin community with career programs like this. Now, to start our program, I am excited to introduce Octavia Goradima. Octavia is the author of Prep, Push, Pivot, Essential Career Strategies for Underrepresented Women. As the founder of 2010 Agency, Octavia has coached leaders at renowned companies including Google, American Airlines, Tinder, General Motors, Nike, and Dow Jones. An acclaimed career expert, Octavia's insights have been featured in the Los Angeles Times, Yahoo, and Black Enterprise, among many others. And now I'll turn it over to Octavia to start our program.
Thank you so much, Joseph, for the warm welcome. And thank you everyone for being here today. So, as Joseph referenced, I'm going to be talking to you all about how to establish what you want from your career, cement your career values, set and achieve new goals, negotiate your salary, and overcome career setbacks. Now, from my own perspective, I started my career 21 years ago, and landing my first job after I graduated started a roller coaster of switching jobs, being promoted, leading teams. You can probably hear I'm originally from England. I also relocated to the United States with my career, hiring others, taking a career break, returning to work as a parent, and making a pivot of my own to become a career coach and author. I've just written a book. It's called Prep, Push, Pivot, and it's currently available for pre-order on Amazon. It's going to be published by Wiley in the new year. And I wrote my book because not everyone has the opportunity to work directly with a career coach. So I've written a career guide that's designed to help underrepresented women navigate looking for a new job, deal with job loss, pivoting to a new career, or return to work after an absence. Now, I became a career coach because I'm passionate about the stuff that people don't see. And that's the stuff that comes before success. I'm passionate about helping people reconnect with their potential. And as a career coach, I'm proudest of helping professionals overcome the challenges and frustrations that are usually left unsaid. As a career coach at 2010 Agency, I'm one of the few people in my clients' network who know exactly how much they earn. I'm one of the few people who know the feedback that was shared on their performance reviews. And I'm one of the few people who know how they really feel about their opportunities and their future. I'm so invested in what it takes to build a career and everything that it takes behind the scenes to set someone up for success. Because building your career is the most valuable and the most personal investment you'll ever make. And knowing your worth underpins everything. So let's get started with how to cement your career values. Now, it took me personally a long time to realize that my career values were the foundation for everything. Now, in the past, the only time I considered my worth was when I was being asked to prepare for a performance review. And even then, it was a struggle for me to self-assess my skills because I calculated my worth through my employer's lens versus my own. Now, of course, over the course of my career, I've created and pursued so many professional goals, but there were also lots of hard times where I felt lost or I felt uncertain of what I should be aiming for. So this workshop is focused on understanding your values, amplifying your potential, and reaching forward to create that next phase of your career, because I want you to know your worth, identify the best ways to find and do your best work. So you might say, well, Octavia, what exactly is my worth? Because for many of us, we actually measure that by how much we earn. But in truth, your worth runs way deeper than that, because it's about understanding what enables you to do your best work, what your non-negotiables are for your career, and embracing your unlocked potential. So, as a first step, I'd like you to cement your career values, as this provides the foundation for the professional goals that you will pursue. Now, I like to think of career values as your guiding light that you use in good times and tough times. Your values underpin everything, because jobs will come and go, bosses will come and go, co-workers will come and go, but your values remain and they are unique to you. And you need to remember that you have choices. When it comes to your career, you decide what matters most. So to start identifying and documenting your career values, the question prompts that are here on this slide can really help. I recommend reviewing and refining your responses several times a year, because that makes your values a priority. Your values provide the foundation for you to create goals that align with your purpose and your principles. So here are some of the questions I'd love for you to consider, and you can jot these down and you can reflect on them later. What are you naturally good at? What motivates you to do your best work? What would you love to do more of at work? And how do you measure success? I'm going to keep this slide up so that you have time to jot these things down, because these are really big questions, and you might have immediate answers to some of them. Some of them you might want to think about in detail, because your values highlight the skills you enjoy using and the experiences you enjoy being part of. They get to the core of your inspiration and what motivates you to do your best work. And they highlight what you want to do more of at work, and also what success means for you. It doesn't mean the same for everyone. So it's really important to think about what success means for you. So jot down the questions. After our time together today, reflect on your responses to those questions and think about your values. And remember that responses can change and they can evolve over time. There are no right or wrong answers. This is not a test. Your responses are for you to define, because this is a space for you to consider what matters most for you in your career, so that you can build a platform for goal setting and actions that will get you closer to where you want to be. So, once you've thought about your values and reflected on those, I'd love to talk about goals. Now, as I mentioned, most people are asked about their goals maybe once or twice a year when that performance review cycle rolls around. And more than likely, somewhere in that self-assessment form, you'll be asked by your supervisor a question that might be along the lines of, well, what do you want to accomplish in the next year? Or where do you want to be 3, 5, 10 years from now? Those are big questions. And we started this workshop talking about career values, because I want you to align your goals with your values, because then you're working towards what matters most to you. Now, you may think that all sounds great, but I also know the reality. Most of us secretly panic a little bit when we're asked about our goals. It's really hard to figure out whether we're being asked or whether we're asking ourselves, what is an acceptable and appropriate answer? Now, whether it's a performance review that's looming or just you figuring out your own next steps, considering your future can be scary because we just don't know. And thinking about goals and being asked about goals can sometimes feel about like the worst kind of test. It's not uncommon to wonder, am I thinking too small? Or on the flip side, is my goal too big and is it unachievable? Can I be honest with myself or anyone else about what I really, really, really might want? On the flip side, it could be you just don't know what you should be aiming for next. These are all legitimate thoughts when someone asks you about goals. Because here's the thing, goals are powerful and complex, and they can also be exhilarating and terrifying, all rolled into one. So what happens if you're confused about possible career goals? It could be you know what you want, but you don't know how to get there. So this next step is designed to help. After you've documented and reviewed your career values, it's a great time to think about the goals that support those. Now, even if you have a goal in mind, we have a vague idea of the goal. These are some of the questions that I use in my coaching sessions that can help prompt perhaps what you want to explore further or what you might do next. I'd love for you to jot these questions down, and again, you can reflect on them after our time together. But the first thing I always love to ask someone is, well, what do you want to experience in the next phase of your career? Where do you feel stuck? What's the next step that's just that little bit out of reach right now? And what's a next step that feels like it's a giant leap that might even be a little bit unattainable? Now, some of your goals might be big, some might be smaller. There's no rights or wrongs when it comes to what you decide on. It just needs to feel right. So now, while we're together, to get things going, just think about, or even write down if it helps, one goal. One goal you're either working towards right now or you know you would love to start working towards. I'm going to pause for a moment for you to reflect on that. Now, last year, I shared a set of goals with one of my mentors. And it took me a while to even articulate that set of goals. But when I shared them, which was the first time I'd said them out loud, his immediate response was, "That sounds great, Octavia, but I'd like you to dream bigger." I just sat there like, oh my gosh. That one statement was like, oh my goodness, I've spent all this time really thinking about what I want, and here's someone looking at me and thinking that I could accomplish even more. I couldn't get my head around that in that moment. But I say that because sometimes there might be another layer to your goals that are even bigger than you may have contemplated. And when you look back on your journey so far, you'll realize that has definitely happened in practice. So the next phase, when you've got a seed of an idea for a goal or a big idea for a goal, is how you move from idea to action. The ways you can do this are ranking the importance, why this goal matters to you, brainstorming ideas about how you might be able to achieve it, breaking those ideas down into smaller stepping stones, smaller pieces, creating ways to celebrate. And by that, yes, it's great to think about the end result, but I'd love for you to think about all those smaller pieces that carve the way and how you might celebrate each one of those. And I'm going to talk about that more in this workshop. And then the key part, committing to a next step, just one next step. I believe the best way to stay on track with your goals is to focus entirely on the actions you need to take, because we can't control the outcome of our actions, but we can control what we do. So for example, scheduling time for actions, for those baby steps, will mean that you're moving forward in the right direction. Sometimes our goals are so far removed from our current reality that we don't know where to start. And when that happens, you might feel a bit deflated, or you might even think, gosh, do I need to make this goal smaller to make it achievable? All you need to do is just think about is what's that next step and committing to that next step. Breaking a big scary goal into smaller pieces and then scheduling the steps is crucial. So often when I'm coaching someone, they'll want to assign a deadline to their goal. For example, I'll tell you, I want to be promoted by the end of the next calendar year. Now, as a coach, I think it's fantastic if you have a timeline in mind for what you want. However, I always recommend focusing on the timeframes for the actions you will take to pursue your goal versus the hard deadline for when you'll complete the goal. For example, if you want to be promoted by the end of next year, some of the steps you might have realized you need to take about, well, you need to talk to your supervisor about the path to promotion. And then maybe there's a professional development plan where there's certain skills that you need to demonstrate to prove that you're ready for the role. Or maybe it's actually just having experience of doing some of the new components that go with the new responsibilities. Whatever those things are, assigning timeframes for key tasks, including sometimes the frequency that you might have to complete these tasks, is what will move you forwards, because that creates an action plan. So for example, if you need to talk to your supervisor, you might realize, well, in our next one-to-one, I need to start the conversation about what my next role might look like and what the path to that might be. Or if you know there's some skills that you want to acquire before you have that conversation, you might realize, well, I'm going to set aside time on Sunday afternoon and I'm going to dive into a course, or I'm going to do some reading, or I'm going to attend a workshop that supports my goals. Setting intentions are the secret to success, because goals become accomplishments when you act. And to act, you need to start. Now, at some point, attending UCLA was an idea that you decided to put in motion. And just because your goals change and grow over your career, it doesn't mean that process fundamentally changes. Now, in my example, I told you I have a book coming out in January. I have wanted to be an author for as long as I could read. It was the biggest goal I've had. And I didn't know how to do it. And so the first thing I had to do was to learn about the publishing process. And then I had to figure out what that first step would be. And no one else knew that I was working on this goal at that time, but it really mattered to me. And I knew that if I didn't find a strategy to hold myself accountable, I might give up along the way. So I decided early on, I was going to meet with a friend once a week, 20 minutes, and just tell her what I was working on for my book proposal, which was the first step that I needed to do at that time, and have her hold me accountable for what I would do next. Maybe you choose to tag team with a friend, where you each share a goal that you're working on and give each other encouragement along the way. Maybe you journal about your process. Maybe you work with a career coach, or maybe you just use your calendar to hold time to plan your next steps. Do whatever works for you. When you've decided on and scheduled your next steps, you should plan how to celebrate each step. And I advocate celebrating each step and not just the end of the goal, because it helps you keep momentum. And it can be something small. Recognizing ourselves along the way can be really hard to do, especially when we're not there yet. In my experience, I finished hosting a show a few months ago that had 11 episodes. And each episode was a project in itself in terms of the preparation, getting ready, doing the broadcast. And I decided early on that I was going to reward myself after each episode, regardless of how it went, just for the fact that I had done it and all of the tasks that were required for it. I also knew I'm kind of bad at remembering to do that. So I created a system to help me. I took an empty jar, took 11 pieces of paper. I wrote down like a small treat, a small reward on each piece of paper, folded it up, put it in the jar. And then after I completed each episode, which was each step for me, took a piece of paper out and committed to doing what I said I would do to recognize my progress. Now, I'm so glad I did that because by the time I finished the season, I was too tired to probably have done anything meaningful. But the bottom line is you get to decide how you're going to track your progress. But celebrating is so important because it reinforces that you're making a continuous investment in your professional development, and every step matters. Now, I'm going to switch gears and we're going to talk about money. Now, money matters more than ever before. As a career coach, I often work with professionals who are poised to receive fantastic job offers, but are absolutely petrified about negotiating their salaries. Now, when you're starting out, you may feel pressure to accept the first job that will kickstart your career. If you're stuck in a job you hate, you may feel pressure to move on to the next opportunity as fast as you possibly can. When you're desperate to progress, you may feel pressure to take the job that provides the title, even if the money isn't close to what it should be. Now, regardless of your circumstances, what you earn matters at every step in your career, even if it feels like the odds may be stacked against you. Now, if you're nervous about discussing dollars during the interview process, remember, you have the opportunity to talk about salary. You're in a great position because that means someone potentially wants to hire you. And this is your moment to determine if this opportunity aligns with your values, aligns with your goals, and then you get the opportunity to make sure that the money works too. Now, according to the global staffing firm Robert Half, 70% of managers expect candidates to negotiate salary. Now, due to the time and resources that are required to recruit the right candidate, hiring managers will often endeavor to try and get a sense of salary expectations before an offer is extended. They want to make sure there's alignment too between the person that they can see doing the role and what the role provides. So remember, most recruiters will expect candidates to negotiate their compensation. So the ball's in your court to decide what you're shooting for. So to help you prepare for a salary negotiation, there are 3 things you need to do. Number 1, crunching your numbers. Number 2, preparing your proof points. And number 3, practicing the ask. Now, let's start with crunching the numbers. The first thing you need to do before you get to the point of the negotiation is to decide the salary that you are targeting for your next role. And to do this, you need 3 things. You need your sweet spot number, your target salary range, and your walkaway point. Now, your sweet spot number is the salary that will make you instinctively smile if you think of it. Now, you're not going to disclose this number during the application process or the interview process. This is for you and you alone to know. Your target salary range represents a set of numbers that you would feel comfortable sharing when the time is right with a prospective employer. And the purpose of the target salary range is to get you as close as possible to your sweet spot number. And then the third number you need is your walkaway point. This is the lowest salary that you would be happy to accept and where you might officially draw the line. Now, like the sweet spot number, you're not going to disclose this to a prospective employer, but you will have decided that if an offer falls short of this number, unless there's other components of the role that align with your values and really excite you, that it probably is more than likely to be a non-starter. So when you're trying to figure out what numbers to work with, there are so many resources you can use, and you're probably familiar with a number of them, from salary.com to PayScale, Glassdoor, Indeed, LinkedIn. And then there's also resources that are specific to your industry and the work that you do, such as industry publications. professional associations, publications and associations sometimes do their own data and share those, sometimes on an annual basis. And then also if there are recruitment agencies that specialize in your sector, they may have insights too. So when you're using online tools, for example, there are a variety of factors that you can filter, from your job title to the location of the role and your level of education, your years of experience, skills, your responsibilities, and even the number of direct reports that you may have. When you do this and you're using these online tools, it's more than likely you're going to find a broad array of figures. And when you do so, it might be hard to know which numbers to use, because some tools might give you a range. Others might give you a very specific figure based on data that you've plugged in and data that they have collected. So I encourage you to review as many resources as you possibly can, but be prepared that you're likely to uncover ranges that are going to vary significantly. As you're doing this, and as you're working through your own application process, be mindful of the size of the company and the revenue of the company that you are interviewing with or applying to. For example, a 50-person firm with a 7-figure balance sheet is going to have a significantly different pay structure from a 5,000-person firm with maybe billions of dollars in revenue. And then, of course, there's the level of experience for the role you're targeting in terms of what the employer is looking for. All of these things are going to impact where you might fall in a very broad salary band. The best thing to do, if you can, if you're really trying to figure out where you lie with your numbers, is to talk to someone more senior than you, who's in your industry, who you trust, to get their perspective on the numbers you're seeing and the ranges. Now, when it comes to deciding on your sweet spot, this is hard. And often when I'm coaching individuals who have been busy researching salaries and pulling all the reports and having all the conversations, I'll often hear, Octavia, I've pulled lots and lots of numbers, but I still don't know what my target salary should be. What do I do? Now, I have to be honest, there isn't a perfect, fail-proof technique for finding your sweet spot salary. Research is essential, but determining your sweet spot is ultimately up to you. Now, one approach you can take is to review your budget and determine your own financial needs. That's when you know how much money you need to earn each year to maintain all of your lifestyle and responsibilities. You can ask yourself, from the research I've done, what's the lowest figure I've seen? What's the median? And what's the highest? Based on my circumstances, what's a salary that would comfortably support my needs? And then based on all of this, what's an attainable salary that I've researched that would make me smile? And once you've reflected on all those questions, you're going to be that much closer to your sweet spot. Now, it's going to feel weird, perhaps landing on a number. It might feel exciting, but do it, regardless of how you feel about it, because remember, as your career progresses, that number will change. You don't need to share that number with anybody, and nothing is set in stone forever. But the reason you need a sweet spot number is it's going to help you create your range. So the next thing you need is a target salary range. And I always encourage using your sweet spot number as the start of your range. Then you need to consider your level of experience and expertise to reach the end number of your range. Now, the American Association of University Women has a recommendation on how to determine how large your range should be that I love. And they suggest for early to mid-career professionals, a 10 to 15% salary range can work really well. And if you're more senior, up to a 20% range may work better for you. Now, I like this recommendation because the salaries that you often find can give you huge, huge ranges, and you need to reconcile where you are in your career to help ascertain where you might fall. And when you are comfortable with the range you've landed on, it's also important to be ready to share the source of your data if you are asked during your negotiation. And then the final number I wanted you to prepare was your walk-away point. In order to prepare for a negotiation, it's really important to consider this. Understanding your worth matters, and your walk-away point is the lowest salary you would be able to accept and where you would privately draw the line. Like your sweet spot, it's just for you to know. You don't have to share this with a prospective employer because it's in your best interest to negotiate for more when you have the opportunity to do so. Now, I know this might feel like a hard thing to do, especially if the stakes are high, and your walkaway point may vary at different times dependent on circumstances. But it's important to be true to yourself and what you deserve, because if it's meant to be, it will be. And if it's not right, it's okay to walk away. So once you've crunched your numbers, the next component of preparing for a salary negotiation is to assemble proof points that show your worth. Now, it's likely you'll have been doing this to put your resume together and to prepare for interviews. And it's really important to keep this list handy of the accomplishments that you've achieved in your most recent role, over your career, the skills you've acquired that prove your worth to your next employer. Consider everything you've done and write everything down. You may not need every single accomplishment, but it's good to have them handy because you'll need at least one of those things for your salary negotiation script that we're going to talk about in a moment. Now, I know that if you've received an offer to join a team, yes, your employer is going to be aware that you have abilities, but it's really important to feel confident underscoring your biggest wins and your strongest skills if you need to during a salary negotiation. So then the final component of preparing for a salary negotiation is to practice making the ask. This, I know, is really hard because there are not many times in our careers when you think about it that we probably actually have this conversation. And the stakes feel high and it's personal, and especially if you really want the role. So take a deep breath when you're practicing and remember throughout the process, just maintain a positive mindset. At every stage of the negotiation process, be engaged, be enthusiastic. And yes, money matters, but you also want to convey to your employer that you're excited about the opportunity. Where possible, when the time comes after you've practiced, I always recommend trying to have a salary negotiation if you can in conversation, whether that's on Zoom or on the phone or in person versus over email. Sometimes you don't have a choice in that, but if you possibly can, try to have a conversation. And when you're practicing for that conversation, there are 6 things that you can prepare to do. And I've listed them here on this slide. So part 1 is opening the conversation with thank you and conveying excitement about the opportunity. Part 2 is sharing a compliment, and this should be specific to either something you experienced during the interview process or something you've learned about the team or something about the company. It has to be real and it has to be genuine. Part 3 is then explaining clearly that you'd like to discuss compensation. Part 4 is sharing one of those proof points that I just mentioned, an accomplishment that demonstrates the value that you bring to an employer. Then part 5 is sharing your target salary range. And then the final part is closing by reiterating your excitement about this opportunity, asking if you can continue the conversation, and then listening to what comes next. Now, this might sound like a lot, so this is why I underscore practice. Practice, practice, practice over and over again. Now, you might think, well, I don't have anyone to practice with. And I get it. If you don't have a friend who can do a role play with you, just record yourself. Grab your laptop, turn the camera on, grab your phone, and just record yourself having the conversation. If you do it over and over and over again, it will become more and more comfortable for you to say the words. And remember, salary negotiation is a process. And it's a process that's designed to find a compromise that works for both parties, you and your prospective employer. It's not a tug of war where one person wins and the other person loses. Your prospective employer wants to hire you and you want to work for their company. So finalizing terms is an important part of this process. So next, we're going to talk about how to build career confidence and overcome obstacles. Now, my work as a coach is centered on helping others overcome challenges in the workplace. No one is immune from this. Even professionals who are perceived as high flyers are going to have periods where they struggle. And if you're facing a hard time, you're not alone, and you will come through it. No one feels confident all the time at work, and you might be an intern at the start of your career, you might be the CEO, or you could be just somewhere in between. It's more than likely your confidence will take a hit at the time when you need it the most. Building a career is really hard, and on top of that, it can feel tough if it looks like others are advancing while you're wrapped with doubt. Now, when I'm coaching professionals in one-to-one sessions, 3 of the most common themes I hear when it comes to dealing with obstacles is coping with career envy, overcoming imposter syndrome, and bouncing back from negative feedback. Now, with regards to career envy, we've all been there. You happen to catch a notification on LinkedIn from a former colleague who suddenly scored an unbelievable promotion or an incredible new role, and your heart sinks. Now, in an age of constant social media notifications and updates, it's easy to feel like others are accelerating way faster than you are. And career envy happens to the best of us, even when we're happy for the people with the good news to share. So if you find yourself starting to compare and maybe questioning your progress, it's time to switch gears and embrace your achievements and goals without the filter of anyone else to cloud your view. Now, if that feels uncomfortable because you maybe can't shake the perception that someone else is moving ahead faster, remember this: even if you both started at the exact same point with the exact same skills, your journeys wouldn't be the same, and that's okay. And even if you know the person whose career you're coveting, you might not know everything about the reality of their experience. And the accomplishments that look fabulous and exhilarating from the outside can be really stressful sometimes and unfulfilling, because all we know is how our own career path feels, and that's what we need to focus on. So instead of comparing yourself to others, focus on what you're building towards. Use the achievements of others to fuel you, to motivate you positively. And remember, if they can do cool things, you can do it too. Now, the next setback I mentioned that I hear about often when I'm working with professionals is imposter syndrome. And it's prevalent. Almost everyone might experience it at some point, but being aware of it doesn't necessarily make the feelings go away. Now, imposter syndrome was a term coined back in the 70s when 2 psychologists identified this phenomenon among high achievers who were unable to internalize and accept their successes. And instead, they often attributed accomplishments to luck rather than ability. And they also felt afraid that other people would realize they didn't really know what they were doing. Now, these are perceptions. And my advice to you as a coach, but also as someone who deals with imposter syndrome herself, is that you need to acknowledge the feeling, but also do your best not to let it hold you back. Don't let doubt control your actions. If you feel bad, get some support. Talk it out with someone you trust. And then when you've done so, release the pressure valve a little. That alleviates that pursuit of perfection. Now, this doesn't mean you need to stop striving to do your best. It just means I'd like you to focus your mind on setting yourself up for success. And a great way to kickstart this is to remember what you've done well in the past and what you've achieved in the past. It can be really easy to forget the great things you've done when we're feeling. Another common question I receive is, how do I deal with negative feedback? Now, truth is, negative feedback makes you better, but I know we're human, and hearing that you've done something wrong can sting. So if you are on the receiving end of some bad feedback, first thing is to identify, is it a specific action or a trait? So for example, were you just late for one meeting, or do you have a tendency perhaps not to be organized? And once you've recognized whether it's a specific action or a trait that you have, then think about how you can fix it. And to do that, you need to be open. You need to listen and reflect on the feedback. And you need to give yourself space to be objective, see it from different points of view. And then you'll start to be ready to own it and act on it. But the crucial thing is, don't let it demolish your confidence, because that's the worst thing you can do. And I know that's hard, but try not to get defensive, because one bad thing will feel enormous in the moment. But the truth is, you can turn a bad situation into a catalyst. And whatever went wrong, it's just not going to define you forever, because what you do next is what really matters. So use feedback to solve problems. Because if you own that feedback that you received, if you propose solutions on how to address it, that demonstrates that you're accountable, responsive, and proactive. And those are fantastic skills to have. So whether you're dealing with career envy, a crisis of confidence, or trying to bounce back from a mistake, there's a technique I always recommend to my coaching clients. And that's tracking and aggregating your accomplishments. This is everything when it comes to knowing your worth. It's important to recognize and fully embrace your expertise and previous accomplishments over the course of your career. This is important to do when you're feeling low, and it's important to do when you're riding high, because your feelings about work are going to fluctuate. But here's the thing, your accomplishments, they're concrete. Don't forget them. Negative thoughts are going to snowball at times. So there'll be moments when you need to remind yourself of what you've done well and where you've been successful in the past. Now, the way I track my accomplishments is I have a document on my desktop. It's called September right now, and I just jot down bullets for things that I've figured out or learned how to do, small things. But here's the thing, we forget stuff. We might pause for a minute when something major happens, and then we move on to the next. I get it. That's what we do. But I want you to stop in this moment that we're here together, and I'd love for you to answer this question. What are the 3 most important things that you've achieved so far this year? Because if you don't track your accomplishments regularly, I'd like you to commit to starting that to be a new habit, starting from now. And I'm serious about that, because documenting your accomplishments is the single most important thing you could do for your career. Now, I told you about the document that I keep on my desktop. You might have a list on your phone, you might have a journal. Whatever you do, I want you to have a dedicated space for this. Do whatever you need to do to remind yourself that you know your stuff. And when something great happens, big or small, write it down in that dedicated space, because then it's easy to revisit it when you need to. At the end of each week, look at it. At the end of each month, reflect on it and pick out the #1 thing that stands out for you. Now, if you can do that every month, you'll have at least 12 amazing things to reflect on 1 year from now. So before I bring this to a close, there are 4 things that I would love for you to remember. The first is to cement your career values and to make sure you align your goals with what motivates you the most. Number 2 is don't be scared of new goals, break it down and endeavor, do your best to celebrate every single step along the way. Number 3, if you're preparing for a salary negotiation, crunch your numbers, prep your proof points, but practice making that ask. And number 4, if you're dealing with bouncing back from a setback, regroup, track and review your accomplishments regularly. Because knowing your worth, even when it's not reflected at you, is important. It's so pivotal. Know that it's okay to fail or make mistakes. It's part of building a career. You're going to stumble, you'll mess things up, you will hear no, but you've got to keep going regardless. And aligning your actions with your values is what you need to commit to be doing, whether it's good times or bad times. And if you can channel your energy into taking the steps towards your goals, one step at a time, as you're dealing with challenges, you'll be well on your way. And when the challenges come, lean hard on a support system. And this might include friends, people in your network, or a mentor, or a coach. Don't go it alone. But please do remember, no one else will be truly invested in your career from start to finish. And that's why it's so important to invest in yours. So thank you so much for making the space to join me today. And the one takeaway I just love is for you to just think about what you will commit to doing next. Now we're going to move on to the Q&A portion, but if after we deal with the questions that you have now, if a question comes to you later, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is on the left of that slide, and you can also find me via my website, octaviagoradima.com, and also on LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter and Pinterest. And then, as I mentioned, my book, Prep, Push, Pivot, is coming out in January. It is available for pre-order now, which I'm so excited about. The opening chapter is actually Know Your Worth, and it talks about things that I shared with you here, and also has worksheets and examples on how you can continue the work that we talked about today. The book talks about how to prepare for promotion, how to bounce back from if you hear no when you ask for promotion, how to navigate losing a job, how to come back to a career after career break, and how to pivot into something new if you want to do something new with your next steps. So you can use the QR code here to scan that. And then I'm going to hand it back over to Joseph for the Q&A.
Thank you, Octavia, and thank you for this presentation. The information was so insightful and valuable. Our questions are coming in. So to start off, we have a question from Teodoro. I apologize if I pronounced that wrong, but it's a question about negotiating salary. How do you negotiate salary if employers ask your range first, but it's lower than your range?
If they share a range, was that first, or if they ask for a range first?
It says if your employer asks your range first.
Yes.
But I think that.
So if they ask for a range first, and that's not uncommon, and that's why crunching your numbers early really matters, because if you've crunched your numbers early and you've determined a range that you're comfortable with, you personally can't lose. Now, every employer has different compensation strategies, and that's not dependent necessarily on the size of the employer, it's just on how they compensate across the board for their employees and what they have available. Some employers might be very transparent, and there are certain industries where they have to be transparent about what the parameters are. But if you don't know, all you can do is operate from your worth and operate from what matters most to you. Sometimes, even at the very beginning, an employer might ask you about salary expectations just on an application form. And some forms might not even allow you not to skip past that field. I know that, there are times you actually can't skip past that. So that's why I really underscored how important it is to have a range that you feel comfortable with. And if your sweet spot is near the start of a range that you share, then you're in a good place, because it could be that your walkaway point actually is a little bit further away, and there might even still be room for negotiation. But you have to do what's best for you, and it all depends on your circumstances. So having a range that you are comfortable with is so important, because the time will come, whether it's at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end, where you will need to share that.
Great, thank you. Our next question is from an anonymous attendee. What advice do you have for someone who experienced a toxic work environment and is looking for a healthy workplace?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, thank you for sharing that question. And I've been there. So many people that I coach have been there or in that space. And that's why the career values questions and that reflection is so important, because here's the thing, often our values are formed out of not so great experiences. We try something and we realize, oh my goodness, I want to be in an environment that's like X, or I liked the idea of Y, but oh boy, I don't want to do that anymore. Or it could be, oh my gosh, I didn't know about Z, but I love it, and I want to have more of that at work. So the benefit of hindsight is that you look back and you realize that the bad experiences lay the groundwork for good ones. Whether that's you just learning more about yourself, or you knowing the sorts of questions you need to ask, perhaps when you're looking for next opportunities, or just knowing what's true to you. Knowing what's true to you is priceless. So while you're trying to figure out your next steps, try and find ways to stay anchored by continuing to track your accomplishments while you're in a role that perhaps isn't the right fit for you. This might feel like it's not possible to do, but trust me, there'll be some gems in there. There will be. There'll be things that you have done or learned or experienced or contributed to. And I can tell you, because I coach so many people who have what look like incredible roles on their resume or on their LinkedIn profile, who hated every second of that, or struggled with a really difficult coworker, or whatever it is. We've all been there. But my advice to you is, please don't let it kill your spirit, and know that that role won't define you forever.
Great, I think that's such a great mindset to go by and to remember. It's almost like everything happens for a reason mindset, and it's made to, like you said, set the foundation. So that's awesome. Thank you for that. Our next question comes from Laura. What do you recommend for people who don't know what kind of job they want to do next? I know what components I enjoy from my current position, but I don't know what careers have those components.
Yeah, and that can feel paralyzing, but I also think it's incredibly exciting. And bear with me on that, because it might be like, I just want to know. I want to know what I'm supposed to be working towards. Have fun exploring, and exploring doesn't necessarily mean that you can try 5 different careers at once. I get it, that's not possible. But dip your toe into things. Maybe the spaces you can be in, whether it's attending a virtual event or workshops or gathering. Maybe you can read around the industry that you're interested in. Maybe you can commit to meeting X number of people that work in that space and kind of chatting to them and talking to them and learning more. Maybe just by chance, you'll have an experience that really makes that light bulb go off, and you're like, oh, I can do this. What I love in what you shared is it sounds like you're a multifaceted person, and that's going to really stand you in good stead. And you may find that you bring lots of different things into your job. And it may be that you find you do lots of things like I do. I career coach, I write, I do some hosting. I'm lucky I'm able to dip into different things in different ways. It's not always possible to do everything at once. I get it. But don't put too much pressure on yourself. Have fun exploring, trust how it feels, trust what you gravitate towards wanting to do more of, and just try.
Great, thank you for that. Another question we got was an anonymous submission, but they said for accomplishments, would you say intangible counts?
Yes.
Like, for example, returning to the gym, regularly meditating, etc. Not necessarily things that can be measured or gauged, but more so the other way.
So both. So I think intangible really matters for you, tracking your own personal accomplishments that matter to you. You will need to have tangible accomplishments when you're talking about proof points in a salary negotiation, because you need to demonstrate worth in a different way. But the two things can coexist. There'll be plenty of times when you're working on something that might feel intangible, but if you jot down those examples like Joseph just shared that you had put in your question, you will realize after 6 months or a year that going to the gym regularly and meditating regularly means you were in a much better space to be able to do perhaps your best work ever. You didn't realize it at the time. You were just trying to keep a routine maybe, or trying to adopt a new habit. So yes, my accomplishments list has tons of intangibles. I didn't mention it in the presentation, I even have a visual accomplishments list where I keep pictures on a secret Pinterest board of all the really cool things that I've enjoyed experiencing, because the experiences are how it makes me feel. And that really matters to me too.
I definitely agree on that. Our last question that we're going to be able to take, because we're getting close to time, is from May. And she asked, once one has reflected on their goals and accomplishments, how does one decide that they need to change jobs, or perhaps instead try to do more with their current position?
Now, that can depend on a lot of things. And there's a more detailed exercise I do with coaching clients where we go a lot deeper into perhaps a current role and what you enjoy the most, what you might want to experience next, and a lot more questions. And then once you start to ask yourself questions, you might identify, oh my goodness, there's more I could do where I am, but it might involve me having some conversations, or perhaps being patient for a project to open up, or laying the groundwork for something. And it might also make you realize, I've done what I can do here. And maybe it's time to look at something else. Or it might be you're thinking about both things. I firmly believe asking yourself questions, reflecting on the responses, is such a powerful exercise that regardless of what decision you take after that, that awareness that you're ready to do something, whether it's where you are or somewhere else, is just incredible. And it can be very easy to just fall into the pattern of being busy and not really having that reflection time. So just if you are making space for yourself to do that, don't put pressure on yourself then that you've immediately got to flip a switch and there, you're going to be in that next space. It doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes it takes some time. But I'm really proud of you for holding the space to just even ask yourself that. And knowing that you might change your mind 6 months, a year, 3 years, that's okay too.
Thank you so much, Octavia. That actually concludes today's webinar. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. Bruins, I hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and remember, knowing your worth matters, because your career is one of the most valuable and the most personal investments you'll ever make. If you'd like to connect with Octavia, feel free to email her at octavia@2010agency.com. We've thrown that into the chat for your convenience. And as a reminder, you can pre-order Octavia's new book, Prep, Push, Pivot, using the link also being shared in the chat. We'll make sure to include all this information in a follow-up email as well. Take care, everyone, and go Bruins.